Okay, thank you all so much for coming today. I'm going to be talking about how to handle change because it feels like change is in the air these days. I don't know if you can relate personally, but I've noticed that there's a lot of change happening in the world, in our lives, in our community. It's also a time where kids are going back to school. Or some people are going to GPA, like Christian is leaving for GPA. When are you leaving today also?
No,
Thursday. So this is our last Sunday with him, so please give him a good send-off. Why did you cut your hair off?
it's too much. I couldn't handle it.
Okay. Fair enough. That might make fundraising a little bit easier. Yeah, and then Oichi, yeah, he was here. He's leaving tonight as well. So that's a big change. For some of us, we're trying to continually adjust and readjust our life with all the changes happening in the world and how COVID has affected our life. Some people kind of going back to pre-COVID life or pre-COVID work expectations or lifestyle. Some people are moving. I know Sunduk and Christy, they're moving up here from the Springs. They're bringing a big moving truck up here today, actually. Some people are dealing with retirement, having babies, grandbabies. On that note, I was really touched when I looked at the meal train list for Yuri. We sent out that meal train, and I didn't really follow up with people to really, push people to sign up for it, but maybe a week later, I checked the list and it was full. It was full till like November, something like that. And I was just really touched. I was really proud of our community. So many people wanted to really support them. And I know not everyone even knows their family or knows them very well, but just, wanting to help somebody where there's a real need. And I thought that was really beautiful. And another big change is, we have these Ukrainian families, like Serge's family has come. And Eugene's family is arriving in a month, and that's a huge change, right? I mean, to be able to not only move to another country, but to move to another country because you can't stay in your current country, where you grew up, where you raised your kids, where you have friends and family and things that maybe you're used to, familiarities, and to be able to go to a whole other country, that's a huge change. And I definitely, I feel like that's one of the bigger ones that's kind of coming into our community right now. Maybe you might be experiencing some internal changes in your life, some changes of attitude or habits, health, maybe even expectations or hopes and dreams. Maybe you're thinking about wanting to maybe some change of new dreams, or maybe adjusting to old dreams, maybe not working out. And then, of course, the world is changing all around us. Some changes are good, some changes are bad. And we've gone through so much in the last few years. And it shouldn't be surprising if you maybe feel a little bit worn out by some of the chaos that's been happening in our lives and in the world these last few years. A few years ago, when we were doing some reflection or education on parenting, we ran across this list. I don't remember where we found it or what, but it was a list of major things that can happen in a family. And there was lots of things on the list, things like trauma, divorce, abuse, things that are basically universally negative. But then there's things that aren't necessarily negative, but they're just a big change, like moving or getting a new job or changing schools or something like that. And so on this list, it said that no matter what, even if your child has experienced like 2 or 3 of these things, even if they're not necessarily the bad things, but they're just big changes, then you can expect, guaranteed, that there are going to be major behavioral shifts, or I think they said problems, irrational behavior. And I think we were going through some of that at the time with our kids. But I found that is interesting. Change affects all of us. And even as adults, we may not be small children, but we don't even realize how much the changes happening in our society and in our lives can actually really affect us so deeply. They can push us to extremes that maybe we didn't realize were possible. And these kind of changes, good or bad, can be challenging to deal with. Because sometimes we just don't want things to change. We'd like things to stay the way they are. And we're going through this a little bit right now with our kids, just because they're getting older, like kids do. But they're not children anymore so much. Our boys are almost 13, and Mia's not a teenager yet, but she's kind of closer to being a teenager than the boys are in some ways, just in her views and maturity on things. And there's a part of me that's really sad about that, because it's been really, our kids have put us through some different challenges, like all parents, but it's really nice that they're just kids, they're just innocent young children, and we hope that we can raise them through the challenging teen years well, but that's uncharted territory for us. So it's uncomfortable, it's new, it's different, and we'll figure it out as we go. But they won't be able to stay the way they are forever, which seems a little bit unfair, because it takes a while to kind of get a grasp of this whole parenting thing, or whatever you may be happening to do in your life, whether it's in your job or as a parent or as a spouse, or whatever role that is kind of present in your life right now. It doesn't just happen instantly. It takes time to adjust. It takes time to figure it out. It takes time to get good at it. You make mistakes, and then maybe before you know it, you move on to the next thing. And I feel like that's kind of the way it is with kids. Like you start to figure things out, and then they move on to the next stage of life. And then maybe by the time we figure that out, then they'll be adults, and maybe they'll be moving out. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But life doesn't wait for us to figure things out and then to be able to enjoy how good life is because we figured it out and it's good and it's balanced now. It doesn't seem to happen that often. Yeah, it takes time to adjust, to change. I feel like in some ways I'm still in denial about my body is getting older. And it's not old by any means, but I have to accept the fact that if I want to be healthy the way I was, when I was 10 or 20 years younger, I have to make extra effort. I have to be more careful about what I eat. I have to be more careful about what I do than, say, 20 years ago when it seemed a little bit more just automatic. But life is like that. Life is always changing, and sometimes we just get caught off guard because we hope or think that things won't change. Last week, we ended up having to look for a new school for our youngest daughter, because when we put our kids into the school that they were going to before, it's a Montessori school. And we really liked Montessori style of education. We felt it would be a really good fit for our kids. And it was for a while. But then at one point, the school, in order to be able to use a public school building, they had to change their category to an innovation school. So they were still technically a Montessori school, but they were more of a, not so much a Montessori school anymore. They were much more, they had to be much more focused on test results and scores, which is fine, especially for families that are looking for that. But we got a little bit tired of the teachers constantly coming to us and saying, Annalise is behind in reading, Annalise is behind in writing, Annalise is behind in math. And we're like, she's in kindergarten. I don't know. I mean, of course, it's good to have benchmarks and everything, but for us, we were much more concerned about, does she love school? Does she love learning? Does she have good friends? Is she getting along well with her teacher? These kind of things. And so, we put her back into the school this year, hoping that things would get improved, but they didn't. They got much worse very quickly. So we ended up finding a more true to Montessori nature school. It's actually closer by, and so we have her. She's going to be starting there this week, and that's going to be a change, but hopefully it will be for the best. But we kind of hoped and assumed that the school that our older kids went to and had a great experience with Montessori education would stay the same, but it didn't. And that's fair. Things change, and we have to learn to adjust with the changes as they come by. But it's a little bit painful, it's a little bit uncomfortable, and very inconvenient. We definitely would have preferred to just leave her there. But this brings to mind this verse from Genesis. As long as the earth remains, there will be a springtime and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night. So God kind of made this world in such a way that it's always changing. It's always going through cycles. It's going through ups and downs. You may prefer the summer, but summer only lasts for so long, and eventually winter will come. You may prefer the fall. I love fall, but fall only lasts for a short period of time, and eventually we move on, and we have to learn to appreciate all the different seasons for the unique characteristics that they offer to us. So, we as human beings are kind of interesting because on the one hand, maybe we struggle with change, but on the other hand, actually we like change, right? I mean, don't we get excited if we have an opportunity to visit a new restaurant or visit a new place, maybe go on a trip to some country that I've never been to before? Don't we get, isn't it kind of thrilling to get into a new job or try a new class or maybe bought a new house and, or in a new place and you never experienced being there before, or trying a new hobby or try a new routine or new show. We actually like to keep things fresh. We like to mix things up. We like to try new things to a certain degree. But on the other hand, sometimes we just want things to stay the same. But then when things stay the same for too long, then they start to, what's the word? Yeah, it starts to stagnate. It starts to get old. We start to get antsy. So we kind of want both. But that means that we not only need to learn to embrace changes that we enjoy or that we like or we want in our life or we wished for or we hoped for, but also the ones we didn't ask for, the ones that we didn't want. Those are many times the most challenging changes to really appreciate and value. So changes are not always good, but God will use those changes for good if we seek for God's hand in our lives. This is from Romans 8:28. We know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love him and are called to his purpose for them. God's purpose for every change in your life is to make you more like him, to guide us further on the path that he has for our lives, if we are open to it. Of course, this verse talks about God working through circumstances to make something happen in your life. And it talks about for those who love him and are called to his purpose for them. But I think that also actually encompasses even those people who don't necessarily feel like, I love God, or I feel called to God's purpose. But I think that everybody deep down inside actually has a yearning for God, but so many people are turned off to God or have their reasons for disbelief. But at the end of the day, we know from the divine principle that God actually wants this for each of his children. But in all honesty, human history has been tragic. Yes, there has been good things. There have been positive developments. We look at the world 1,000 years or 2,000 years or further back than that, and we compare it to today, we can see many good improvements. But along the way, how many civilizations and cultures in the world have a history of suffering? So the 20th century was full of huge changes. This last 100 years, we had 2 world wars, we had the rise and fall of communism, we had incredible changes to society and technology, nuclear weapons, and incredible pollution to the environment. And that's just in the last 100 years. And then, also throw into that global pandemic and who knows what else is going to happen. But even with all of that, God has worked in history to further his will. Even despite all those terrible things and tragedies and suffering. And I think that, in all fairness, partly that's because God didn't have much choice. God had to work with us. God had to work with where we were at. God had to work with our decisions, and a lot of the decisions we've made have not been good, but God had to work with whatever sincerity was there, whatever effort was there, and many, many, many good people in history as well. So this is from our founder, Reverend Moon. He said, "Why do we need God? It is because God has the unchanging truth. God's word never changes. The word that he spoke 1,000 years ago will still apply 100 million years from now. Human words, no matter how eloquent and flowery they are, wither away and fade from view. But God's word transcends all changes wrought by time." So I think it's important for us to digest this perspective as well. We have our lives, and we're at this, point of history in this world. And, because of technology, we get to almost instantaneously see what is happening around the world in real time. It's kind of crazy if you think about it. I mean, it's never existed before, that potential for information overload in a way. And in some ways it's good because we can be informed, but in some ways it's overwhelming because there's just too much. And there's so much that's happening that I have no control over. And that can be very disempowering and stressful. But it's also important for us to recognize that there's always been, like I said before, all of history has been full of these things. And I think that one thing that helps to gain a little perspective is that even despite all those things that have been happening, God has still been working. God hasn't changed. This is another quote from our founder. He said, "The goal set up by God, the Creator, cannot change. God is the center of each person's conscience and the objective of all people's hope. No matter how much time passes, no matter what course history takes, he can never change. Before eternity and after eternity, God cannot change. That is why God said, 'I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end.'" And this is from Isaiah. "Don't you know that the Lord is the everlasting God, and he created everything on this earth, and he never grows tired or weary?" So I think we need to anchor ourselves in this understanding that in times of change, whether it's in our own life or in the world, what is God doing? There must be some greater purpose in all of this. Not just now, but in all of history. If God has been working all through history up until this point, then surely God must be working today. God must be working now, even in these circumstances and situations where sometimes it feels like God can't possibly be involved in any of this. He must be, somehow. And I don't claim to know what that is or what that looks like. I don't know what God is doing. I mean, I get little snippets sometimes. I feel like I can see, what God might be doing here, or what God might be doing there, or what God might be doing in our community or in my life, but I don't really know. But if God exists and God loves his children and God has been working to bring this world back to him, then this may not be God's desire to see the world like this, but God must be doing something. God must be working. And God must be doing everything that he can do. And I don't know about you, but it's a little bit comforting. It's a little bit hopeful when I recognize that. And remember, fallen nature number one, right? Not seeing from God's viewpoint. So in times of change, in times of struggle, what is God's viewpoint? What does God want from me? What is God guiding me? How is God helping me to grow through these circumstances? That's important, that in these times of change that we, besides all the other responsibilities and things that we have in our life, also take the time to be alone with God, to pray, to sometimes just sit, or to sing, or to read, that we can seek for what God's viewpoint is. What is God's perspective on all of this? This is from James. If you need wisdom, just ask God for it. God is generous, and he'll gladly tell you what you need. And I think on top of that, we also need to seek out people in our lives who have wisdom, perspective to be able to learn from. So in conclusion, change is something that we all experience. It's unavoidable, for better or for worse, for good or for bad. Sometimes we choose it, and sometimes change is forced upon us. But the kind of person you become at the end of the day, after all is said and done, is decided by how you choose to look at these changes, to see how God might be working in your life through them, to help you to become a better person, to become a better spouse, a parent, a son or daughter, and to be in touch with our Heavenly Parent who never changes. Please join me in prayer. Good morning, our dearest Heavenly Parent. We are so humbled that even though we exist in such a short blip in human history, and our lives can feel so small so many times in so many ways, that despite all the things that we are challenged with and that we deal with that maybe can be overwhelming to us, you are still there right beside us each and every moment of our life. You have a purpose for us. You have a path and hopes and dreams for each and every one of us, Heavenly Parent. And many times you have to pull back and watch us make bad mistakes, bad choices. Sometimes we go off the path that you have set for us. But you never change. You never change in your hopes for us and for this world, for all of your children. Even if it takes 1,000,000 years, you're going to see it through. And at the end of the day, each and every single person here and in this world will be with you. And I wish that day could come sooner, but we will work towards it, Heavenly Parent, and we will wait for it, and we will encourage one another in that way. We just thank you for being who you are, that no matter what challenges we may face in this life and in this world, we can always rest in your unconditionalness. In you being who you are, you will never change. We can always count on that. You will always be there for us. I pray, Heavenly Parent, that as good children, as your children, that we can also become like that for you and for one another. That even in the challenging situations and changes we may experience in our life, we can find comfort knowing that you have a plan and that you're working in our lives. And there's just a lot to be grateful for. So Heavenly Parent, this morning as we as a community gather for church, I really pray that we can offer our changes, maybe transitions and challenges we're experiencing in our life to you. Please guide each and every single person here, Heavenly Parent. Please touch their hearts and their spirits as we go from this place into our homes and in our work and everywhere we're going. Please guide each and every one of us, and please guide our community. And I thank you and offer this prayer in my name, Michael Adonia Hendrick, a blessed family. Amen and adieu. Thank you.